All right, and welcome. This is the Bulstma podcast. I'm your host, Craig Nadeau. Excited today to have with me Rebecca Bulstma. Rebecca is an AI enthusiast. She's a speaker and an educator. She knows a lot about AI, and we're excited to have her share some of that knowledge with us. Please, after this, if you enjoy it, please hit like, follow us on Instagram, follow us anywhere else you can find us. And also, don't forget to follow our sponsor, Partner Staffing, on LinkedIn, Instagram, and anywhere else you can find them. In any case, let's jump right into it. This is Rebecca. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming on the show, Rebecca. Appreciate having you.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
To talk to you. I hear about you on the fringes of our realities, but don't get to talk too much. And I think we probably talked more back many years ago, back when you were doing other things in life, and now you've progressed, evolved, devolved. That's what you're into, what you're doing now. So
yeah, I think evolved is a good word. We're always kind of growing and navigating towards the things that we're meant to be doing. And I think that's where I am now.
Yeah. And now, so your world all about AI, maybe being a mom too, but mostly AI and
kind of, yeah. I'm the director of communications for a large public school district in Southern Alberta, and AI kind of is a side hobby that's taking over my life. So,
and one thing you said that was really interesting off camera was that AI, and you talk to people that maybe don't have a ton of AI experience, and and I guess maybe if I think about it from a lay perspective, there's been this sudden, it's all about AI. I was watching Terminator and now it's all real. And it's like, oh my goodness, now what? Like, why did it, and I guess maybe that's an interesting question. Why did it burst into reality? Whereas maybe we were seeing a trickling of AI, but then suddenly something happened and there was like almost a birthday. And now we're dealing with AI. Like, what happened? Where did it come from?
Yeah, there was definitely kind of this inception day in November of 2022 where suddenly this new kind of AI exploded onto the scene. And the whole world of artificial intelligence has been around for a long time. A lot of what we do in our everyday lives is already powered by artificial intelligence. So the algorithms that run your social media, Netflix that's choosing what you want to watch next, whatever kind of podcasts are recommended for you, that's all artificial intelligence. But what kind of changed was this surprise on the scene of ChatGPT. So back in November of 2022, a company, a tech firm called OpenAI, launched what they called a low-key research preview of a product they've been working on called ChatGPT. They've been working on it for a while. And the night before the launch, the company president, Greg Brockman, kind of had drinks with everyone, and he predicted kind of a low-key launch of this product. He thought maybe one Twitter post with maybe 5,000 likes. He didn't expect it to be a big deal. And that's honestly how they launched it. Sam Altman posted a tweet that said, hey, we came up with this thing called ChatGPT. You should check it out. And within 5 days, ChatGPT hit 1 million users, which is unheard of.
Wow.
Like, it took Instagram months to reach all these other companies. And then they hit 100 million users within 2 months. And it just kind of exploded. And this type of generative AI, really, explosion is a good word because now it's everywhere. It's in everything. And this type of AI is the type of AI that makes things. It generates brand new writing, brand new pictures, brand new songs, brand new videos. It makes brand new stuff. And we've never seen that before. All the other AI was just operating on rules. If somebody watches this show, recommend them this show. If somebody orders this on Amazon, then order them this. If these two people have a friend in common, recommend them to each other. Rules-based AI. And this is something completely different. And it's just kind of captured the world's attention.
Wow. So if someone's not involved in AI, should they be dead scared of the reality ahead? Or like there's people that aren't ever going to go on ChatGPT or any kind of AI. They have to interact with stuff that's probably generated. Like you said, Netflix is kind of AI generated, but like, should people be concerned that they're not part of the up and coming?
I don't think concerned, but I think regardless of what industry you work in, it is coming to your industry. And the
Mhm.
bottom line is if you don't lean in and figure it out and embrace it, um, it's not going to necessarily take your job, but somebody who understands how to use it and how to work it into the job will probably take your job. When I say that this is a big deal and everybody needs to lean into it and look at it and at least understand it, I'm dead serious. Like it is coming for everything, not in a bad way. It is so helpful in everyday life, like in the most amazingly unexpected, creative
Mhm.
ways. There was a study, there's this guy named Ethan Mollick who is like, he's like my AI rock star. I just love him. He's this professor at Wharton University, and he's just been into this for a long time. So I follow him on all his platforms. And back when ChatGPT first came out, they just gave it to a group of random professionals and said,
Mhm.
hey, we're giving this to you. We're not going to tell you how to use it, but just use it. Try and figure it out and use it in your
Yeah.
everyday life. And the results were amazing when they checked back with these people with no training. And the people who used it even a little bit were like getting 40% more work done,
Mhm.
25% better quality, way faster, like just all of these things that just made them better at their
Yeah.
jobs and ultimately happier at their jobs because this type of AI can take the thing you hate the most about your job and automate it so that you have more time to focus on the things you like about your job. That's why
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. Is there a risk in it? Like, I guess if, if someone, I have to invent something, but if someone has to repetitively create a paragraph of some information about some products, is there some risk that we dumb down people and like we stop being creative because we depend on AI to be creative for us?
Craig, there are so many risks about this new AI. Like I am like this is really cool person, but I swing back and forth between this is amazing to
Yeah.
wow, this is terrifying. This is going to ruin a lot of things. And I just kind of have this constant swing.
Hmm.
There's a lot of things I think that everyone should really be worried about. And that's part of the reason I think everyone needs to dive in and really understand this because you have to have a foundational AI literacy to navigate the world we're about to live in, the
Yeah.
risks and the opportunities. And if you put your head in the sand and you don't know what's coming, you're putting yourself and your business at risk.
Didn't Elon Musk like he has this kind of famous YouTube clip where he says we have to be worried about AI. I forget what the exact clip was, but he says something about how we have to be scared of or something. I don't want to dramatize
Yeah,
something, but
no, totally. And Elon has been involved in the AI game for a long time. He was actually one of the founders of OpenAI, the company that
oh,
developed ChatGPT, but he left before this big launch. But he has his own AI he's developed that's built right into the X platform. He's big into it. He has tried to raise the alarm and be like, listen, there are risks with this. Maybe we should put this on hold. But really, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle at this point. We're all just going to have to kind of roll with it. But yeah, anybody who doesn't think that there's going to be risks and major ethical issues attached with this, is probably not very well informed. There's a lot of things that we need to be really concerned about.
so
And
are we like well you're opening the door to like what are the top risks then? Like what have
oh,
you learned about?
there are so many. Okay. Well, I think one of the primary risks
Yeah.
is this idea of bad actors. And so Jeffrey Hinton, who we consider the godfather of AI,
Yeah.
he was one of the people who invented it. And he actually came out shortly after the launch of ChatGPT and was like, listen, guys, like this is not good. Like I kind of wish I wasn't involved in this. Because one of the main risks is bad actors using the generative AI to do bad things. And we've seen this for decades, right? Anytime there's a new technology comes out, people figure out a way to use it for crime or to do
Yeah.
bad things.
Sure.
But this takes it to the next level. So, for example, it is really the easiest thing to clone is a human voice. So now,
Mhm.
free and available to everybody is generative AI software that can take your voice for 5 seconds on the call with a telemarketer, duplicate it, call your mom, tell her you're in trouble and you need money, and completely sound
Right.
like you. Or this idea of deepfakes, where I could take this video of you and I having this conversation and take your likeness, deepfake it with your voice, and have you doing something completely illegal or inappropriate. And at this point, there's no way to regulate it, there's no way to control it, and there's no way to really identify whether or not it was actually you. So
Hmm.
that's a huge risk. In Hong Kong, just I think after Christmas, there was this huge company where this guy hopped on Zoom with his CEO, and his CEO and CFO told him to transfer $25 million to this separate account, which he did. And it was a deepfake, and the company lost $25 million. And so this idea of bad actors, if you don't realize that this is happening, which takes us to another risk, is that legislation, like we already know it moves slow, but it cannot keep up with this. Everything new is happening every day. The technology is moving at light speed, and legislation is moving at a snail's pace to keep up with it. And so it's the Wild West. People are doing whatever they want, unregulated, and there's no catching up. So, and then the risk of what you mentioned as well, people getting overly reliant on technology to do things, maybe not using our full brain. I work in education. We talk about this all the time. How are we going to teach kids to write if there's something that will write for them for the rest of their life? All of these ideas. So there's ethical issues, with how these models were trained. Someone like ChatGPT, and it's all very gray. They don't give us a lot of information, but they really just trained it on everything on the internet, Reddit threads and blogs and who knows what else. And now people like the New York Times or authors or producers are coming forward and saying, hey, we never said that you could train your model on all of our stuff, because right now I can just go in and say, hey, write me a recipe in the style of John Grisham. Cool. And because it was trained on John Grisham's book, it'll write me a recipe in the style of John Grisham. And so there's all these lawsuits now happening on copyright infringement. And I'll give you one more, because I talk about risks and ethical issues of AI all the time. But because it was trained on the internet, we know that there's serious underrepresentation issues and bias and stereotypes and prejudice that are really embedded into the fiber of what the internet is. And a lot of that was transferred into the models. And so we're seeing a lot of issues connected to that, that there's really poor representation of all the different groups that are out there. And probably the biggest, most significant risk, and the reason everybody needs to understand this, and if you hear nothing from this podcast, you need to hear this, is that the outputs, or what the generative AI gives you when you ask it a question, it lies all the time. So it makes stuff up, it hallucinates, and it could be giving you 20 websites that don't exist, or information about a news article that never happened. And so these models are trained to try and make you happy. And that means if there's a gap and it doesn't know, it will hallucinate and just make something up that sounds 100% convincing, but it's absolutely false. So people need to know that when they're using these models, that you have to fact check everything. And part of the reason why it's so important to keep humans in the loop and not just automate what you do off to an AI is because it might be wrong. So you have to be double checking everything that you're doing all the time.
You know what I think would be really great is if the people that create scams and spam mails used AI to double check their grammar.
Well, it is getting better. I've had quite a few of them, especially on LinkedIn. And so I think people are using it to monetize and scam and all of these things.
So it is interesting that you talked about bias, because that was one of the early things back. I remember seeing articles about that years ago where they would run parallel computer environments, and then they would show like a political bias even in a question that you would ask. If you asked about a president or a leader of something, it would show a political bias. That was very interesting.
And there is documented political bias in these as well. But a lot of the outputs that you get, or the results you get when you interact with these models, really foundationally depend on how you ask the question. Like anything else, like you as a podcast host, right? You get better responses the better question you ask. And so this idea of prompting, which is how we interact with these generative AI models, we talk to them in natural language processing, so natural human language, like you and I are talking. But if I ask a question in a certain way, I'm more likely to get a better response than this way, or one that leans a little more politically one way. But some of the models have just had major issues because they've embedded specific agendas within their models. And I don't use agendas in a negative context per se, but a perfect example of this is Google Gemini. So Google released finally a huge version of a ChatGPT type large language model, which is what these are called. And it generated pictures as well. And part of the programming that they put into that is that they wanted every picture that was generated to be racially diverse and fair and demonstrate a lot of diversity. And in the first day that it was launched, people ran into some major problems because they would ask it to generate images like from Nazi Germany or from the signing of the Constitution. And all of these images ended up being incredibly racially diverse. Generate me a picture of the Pope. And people realized suddenly that they couldn't get historically accurate images and that it was nearly impossible to generate an image of a white male. And so it's an idea of this programming of the models gone wrong. So Google pulls their image generation offline and it still isn't back online. Not their entire image generation, but just the ability to generate pictures of people.
Wow. That's really interesting that that would happen. So I guess we just need to be aware of, well, we need to be aware of everything on the internet. You could be an AI generated thing right now. I don't know. Like
I honestly could be. There's a company called HeyGen that you should check out, and they
yeah.
will take, or 11 Labs, they'll take, I just give them a 5-minute video of me just like this, and then I can just give it text prompts and it will respond looking exactly like me, sounding exactly like me, and you would probably never know. And that's the society we're moving towards, is that you can't trust anything you see. We're already kind of there, but it's about to get a whole lot worse.
So here's a question. I know a lot of people, they get nervous anytime we say there's a new computer, a new robot, or new anything. Everyone's like, oh, I'm gonna lose my job, or I guess the other side of the spectrum is, oh, there's going to be so many more jobs. So what's your take? What do you think? We're going to lose jobs, stay the same, or gain jobs over this?
I have a few different thoughts on this. I think it's not very realistic that we'll just flat out lose our jobs, because I think each of our jobs are just bundles of individual tasks. So what I do in a day are like maybe 20 different tasks associated with my job. And is there a possibility that AI will take over some of those tasks? Absolutely, with human oversight, for sure. But I do think there will be a lot more jobs. I think back to kind of mid 1900s, when probably your grandma, my grandma, everybody, the number one job was like manually connecting phone calls, those phone operators, right? And it was one of the most massive layoffs for females in history when that changed. And now when you look at how many jobs there are in the telecom industry, there's millions, right? Like there's tons. And so we find ways to replace it. People panicked when, digital cameras came out. What are photographers going to do? What's going to happen with this and this and this? But there's a massive photography industry still. So I think that we evolve, and I have faith that we will evolve. I think in the interim, I think the next 20 years are going to be a bit rocky. And I think people who are determined not to learn about it or upskill or incorporate it are in for a rough ride. And I think that we as a society have a duty to help everybody gain, and this is why I do what I do, a basic understanding, gain AI literacy so that people aren't left behind. And I think if you would have found however many years ago, people who were like, the internet, I'm not doing that. I refuse to do the internet. Well, how long did they last? Where they were and what they were doing. This is going to be kind of like that.
I leaned hard into my flip phone for a long time. And I said, I'm never going to have this email on my phone. I was like, yeah, that's in the past. You know, what's funny is you mentioned like technology adoption. And, I think back, like, you think back maybe 25 years and people are saying, oh, yeah, we use robots. It was all about robots, maybe ninjas too, but mostly robots. And they were going to take over all the jobs. And I would always think, well, listen, like someone still has to put your groceries in a bag. And then you fast forward 30 years in the future and I have to bag my own groceries now.
Well, there's a company, OpenAI, the ChatGPT company, just partnered with another company called Figure, where they put the brains, the generative AI of ChatGPT into an actual robot, and the video, I'll send it to you so you can link it in the show notes, would blow your mind. I've been following the evolution of robots for the last little while, and it's been slow, and it's been like, they don't really have motor skills. I'm not really worried about this, but this new video has made me rethink. Like, I think robots are super cool, but now that they have this ChatGPT ability, and I should tell you, ChatGPT is beyond just you ask it to write something and it writes you a cool poem. Like that is the least interesting way to use it. I don't use ChatGPT to write for me at all because I'm a writer. I like to write. But one of the cool capabilities a lot of people don't know about is I can use the app on my phone. I could take a picture of my fridge and say, give me 10 ideas for dinner based on what's in my fridge. And it
Oh
will
yeah.
look at everything in my fridge and tell me what's for dinner. And so they're incorporating that technology now into these robots where a human can say, hey, I'm hungry, get me something to eat. And the robot looks around the room, determines the only edible thing in the room is an apple, picks up the apple, hands it to the person. And
Hmm.
all of these things working together that 5 years ago were completely unfathomable are moving really, really quickly now. That idea of the multimodal AI that can see and hear and talk and respond and think critically and give responses based on different scenarios. It's all kind of coming to a head and it's going to start going even faster.
Do we ever like, I don't know, I guess the one thing I worry about is it's maybe this over dependence on having someone else do your job for you. And I do worry that somehow this dumbs us down. Like, but then I also think, well, listen, I probably plagiarized out of an encyclopedia in elementary school. I'm sure I did. And then, now we're plagiarizing from just telling ChatGPT to write an article for me. But do we ever worry that it dumbs us down a little bit? Like, or does it make us smarter, better, faster? I don't know. Like,
I think it all depends on how you use it. I do have concerns about introducing it into schools where kids need to foundationally learn those
yeah.
skills first. But for someone like me, I have found it's made me smarter. And that's because I have 3 different AI large language models on my screen all the time.
Yeah.
I interact with all of them I compare answers and responses. I have to think critically all the time about the information that it's giving me. There's a really amazing AI program system tool called Perplexity AI that's kind of like Google, but it responds with, a large language model response, but it cross-references and gives you citations to every website where it drew all of its information from. So I'm still
Oh,
citing
really?
sources, but the other great thing is that there's this idea of academic democratization. And what I mean by that is I was never going to sit down and read some of these published academic journal articles
Sure.
3 years ago, ever. Like they were made for people way smarter than me. And even if I wanted to, they were out of reach for me. Now I can take that journal article, I can give it to an AI model like Claude 3, which is a favorite of mine right now, and say, I work in communications and AI. I want you to take this academic journal. I want you to carefully review it, pull out anything that might be related to my field or people in my field, summarize it for me, and give me
Hmm.
some critical questions that I should ask myself about this information. So suddenly I have access to way more knowledge and information than I ever have before. And a whole world of possibility opens from that. And now if I'm not spending my time doing tedious parts of my job, I have more time to explore more creative aspects or think bigger or figure out how to better connect in a human sense with people than I did when I was just sitting maybe manually doing specific things that were a time suck and were making me hate
So do you,
whatever I was doing.
before you go and meet with your friends, do you go on AI and say, how should I interact with my friends better?
No, probably not. But there are times like there's a really great AI system called pi.ai, and it's on your phone. It's free, and it's like it's almost like a compassionate, like human bestie. And so if you're like, hey, I have to have a difficult conversation with this person, I want you to role play it with me, or tell me everything that could possibly go wrong, or help me prepare for this. And you can have that
Hmm.
conversation verbally while you're driving, just to
Yeah.
dump thoughts or process. And so this idea of friendly, empathetic AI, a companion AI,
Yeah.
is opens a lot of possibilities. I'm somebody who likes to work alone and work independently, but I did miss having someone to bounce ideas off of because I process verbally. And so now I have a method to do that, which
Right.
is very, very helpful for me. But I use it for random things all the time. Like I'll say, here's all my Peloton data from the last 6 months. When am I the most effective and the least effective? Which
Really? Wow.
instructors' classes do I work the hardest in?
Yeah.
Because ChatGPT can analyze spreadsheets of data and give you all the insights like that instantly.
Wow.
So it told me, you suck when you work out on Tuesday nights and you're always lazy in this instructor's class. Your ideal time is this. And, or if I'm doing goal setting or writing some like daily manifestations, or it can help me with all of those things. There's specialized versions of ChatGPT that you can just give it an academic journal and say, why does this matter?
Hmm.
and it is already programmed to tell you why exactly you should care about it and why it matters. And
Is
so it's cool.
Yeah, this is maybe just in the rabbit hole stuff, but like when you ask AI to look at a significant amount of data, is it really looking at data or is it making an assumption about the data? You know?
It's really looking at the data, but how you prompt it really matters.
Really?
So there are specific prompts that you can just copy and paste that people have put together, chain of density prompts, they're called, that basically on the back end tell the AI, summarize it, pull out the most important things, and go back into what you missed and summarize those, and then incorporate them into your response and do that 3 times and come up with a really dense summary for me.
Hmm.
So it is looking at whatever you give it, you upload a document, you upload a picture. I'll take handwritten notes sometimes in a meeting, and then I'll just take a picture of them at the end and say, I want you to summarize these, give me a list of 3 action items, and transcribe the whole thing. And it will do it instantly
Hmm.
and pull out what the most important parts are from looking at it.
That's pretty
The only thing to be
yeah.
aware of, though, is I touched on this earlier. It's a problem they haven't been able to solve yet. Even if you give it all the information and say, I only want you to look at my transcripts from my podcast for the last year
Huh.
and give me a summary of everything that everybody talked about, it might still hallucinate something. And we
Hmm.
don't know why. Even if you give it all the data, it still hallucinates sometimes. And they'll fix it eventually, but it's just something to be aware of for
Well,
right
but
now.
you know what's interesting about that? You and I do that too. Like
Mm-hmm.
you ask me a question, I'm gonna come up with what I think is the right answer, but I still have to fill in the gaps with whatever I think is reality, and it may not actually be reality, but it is to me. So,
And it's so funny that you bring that up because more and more we're realizing that these models operate a lot like humans. I'll give you an example. People are always trying to come up with ways to improve prompts, to make them
mhm,
more
mhm.
interesting or to make the model perform better based on a prompt. And Google came out with this white paper that said if you tell an AI model at the end of your prompt to take a deep breath and work step by step, your output immediately gets way better.
Really? Wow.
So these human-like
Yeah.
things that we tell it and we interact with it, quirky kind of human-like features, we don't know why. It doesn't make sense. We're figuring it out as we go, but it's just interesting because you're right. They are very kind of human sounding. And some of the things that work on humans, here's another example. Sometimes ChatGPT, I'll give it a task and it'll say, sorry, I can't do that. If I hype it up and say, I know you can do this, I believe in you, you have done this for me before, and this is very important to my
Yeah.
job, please try again, suddenly it can do it. So
Wow.
if you add hype, positive reinforcement, same as with people, with these models, you end up getting great results. And it's so weird, but it's so fascinating to look
Smart.
at. So,
Wow. So where does it go in the future? Like and I guess this is my weird, probably singular perspective is I still struggle a little bit with like, oh, I'm gonna have to use ChatGPT. So that means I'm gonna have to open it up and sign in and then I'm gonna have to figure out what to say. And it's like, forget it. I'm just gonna do what I needed to do and I'll just Google it. So there's kind of that perspective, but like, does it get easier to access or like what happens in 20 years? Like, what's the prediction 20 years from?
I don't even know if I could give you a decent prediction for 1 year from now.
Yeah,
Honestly, I don't even think I could have told you a year ago. Well, I couldn't have told you 2 years ago. If anyone would have told me I would have been into AI, I would have laughed my face off because
really.
like I never saw this coming for me, but I'm so fascinated
And that's
by it.
fun.
Really, it's hard to know because like I said, there's a lot of bad things that we need to figure out to make sure this isn't weaponized and make sure, all of these safeguards are put into place and people aren't left behind. That's a huge thing, right? Like there does end up being these robots that take tons of jobs from tons of people, which I think that's a long ways off. But what do we do with those people? Where do they go? What do they do? Does that mean that we are now more free to take care of each other? We have more time to take care of other humans. We can become a more utopian society. I hope so. Knowing our society, I highly doubt it, but I'm not necessarily a glass half full kind of gal on a regular basis. But I think it's hard to predict. I think the only thing that we know for sure is that it is not going away. It's
Hmm.
just going to build steam. The heads of all these AI tech firms, one of them said that AI today is as rudimentary as the combustion engine was in the 1800s. We are using like the old dial-up ported phone version of AI right now. And this we are using today, this AI I'm telling you about is the worst AI you will ever use in your whole life.
Yeah.
And so it's just going to get better and better and better and faster and faster and faster.
You know,
And it's weird.
here's an interesting. I'm making my predictions just for kicks because then it gets on the internet and it'll be there forever. Have you heard of Rabbit? It's you have to look it up. It's like a little handheld device that
Yeah.
it's like a
Makes it so you don't have to check your
purpose-built.
phone.
Yeah, so it's a purpose-built unit, which would be interesting if we had a unit because our like and he makes a really good point, the guy who's the president of Rabbit, is that the phone is actually kind of hard to use, even though it's like so much easier than so many other things. But when you think about, look, I need to go on and just even book an Uber, it isn't just like you turn to your phone and say, hey, book me an Uber. There's more to it than that. Whereas the Rabbit is designed to cut back all of the kind of that early interaction into making a request, and then boom, you just make a request. But that would be interesting if AI gets onto, and I'm sure it is probably already. Maybe I'm
No,
behind
you're
already.
right on track. What you're talking about are called AI agents, and that is kind of the next step. And I feel like we'll each have our own AI agent who
Mhm.
has full access to everything that we have and everything that we do. And I can tell my agent through my wearable, my glasses,
Yeah, yeah,
whatever, hey, I need to book a flight for this trip in October. Just go find me the
yeah,
flights. Like I'm looking for something on this day between this window. You know the airlines I like because you've booked everything for me before, and you have my credit card information. So just go ahead and do that. And the AI agent can just handle so many aspects of your life for you. In 10 years, that's for sure where we're going to
yeah,
be. We will be in self-driving cars. We will be using wearables. I think you're right. I don't think phones have a massive future. I think we are going somewhere like wearables, I don't know, chips down the road. If I don't have to carry a phone around and I can just do things through
yeah.
glasses. But again, that's like the cool. And then the scary is everyone, what's happening to your data, what's real, what's not real, are you being recorded all the time, like who is on the other end, will you ever interact with a human person ever again, and how do we make that a priority, and where do we draw the line? So there's all these questions that raises, and nobody has any answers. We're all going to have to kind of muddle our way along and figure it out as we go.
Yeah, I think it is interesting that there was this long-standing theme in movies and media that the the progression of AI or whatever we called it early on was that it was going to recognize that humans were its worst enemy and then just wipe out humanity because that was the answer to some algorithmic issue. But then I think we started to realize that maybe the biggest problem we have in humanity is that we can perfect the relationship and interaction that we want to have without having an interaction with someone. And we start to exclude other people from a world because you said, being alone. And then suddenly we're all alone all the time, but we're having these
Yeah.
amazing interactions with essentially a supercomputer. And
Yeah.
then we don't need people.
And that's
And
a huge risk. I will tell you, like, based on my own journey and experience, because, I started in November of 2022
yeah,
and I
yeah.
dove all in and I spent all this time. I started to really crave human interaction that I never had before. Like if I had the opportunity to have an
Mhm.
in-person meeting versus a Zoom, I was doing in person all the time. And I
Right.
really predict that we're going to see a real strong return to valuing human connection and interpersonal communication. I think that we've overcorrected to texting and emails and Zoom. And we know, and this is going to make me sound super old, but kids these days, have a hard time calling to make their own appointments or
Mhm.
being in interviews and interacting with people. And I think that skill is about to skyrocket in value again, as it has been valuable in the past. Because the only way you're going to know that you're talking to a real person is to have them standing in front of you. Everything else could be an AI. And I
Right.
started to crave that more. And I think that society as a whole, we're going to value interpersonal relationships. I predict in post-secondary and in school, the only way we're going to know if a kid wrote their essay or not is to have them deliver a verbal essay or an
Right.
in-person written oral presentation. So oral communication, I think, is about to be very, very, very valuable. That's another one of my predictions.
How does it? like AI must have a massive impact on content generation. That's kind of the broad term, content
Yeah.
generation for the internet. Like
Mhm.
to a point where does it get to be a little fake or I
Oh
don't
yeah. Well, and in all fairness, like Instagram, social media is fake. Like we already are living in a simulation in terms of the content influencers are putting out. This is my real life. Welcome to a day in my life. Like it's all simulated, it's all
right.
curated. But I think also another prediction I have is that we're going to move a little bit further away from social media because again, it's all going to be AI generated content. I think people are going to be more afraid, and I know I am, to put a video I generate or pictures of myself out there because all someone needs is a picture or a clip of a video of me to deepfake me. And the value of our data and our images and everything is going to be so valuable that I think that we're going to turn away from social media a little bit because I don't want to scroll and just see AI generated content and AI generated human videos
Yeah.
and fake people and fake writing. Like I'm not into it. So that's why I think we're going to see more of a return to human experiences.
Won't that be crazy one day when you're scrolling the internet and you see yourself and you happen to be the spokesperson for some company?
Craig, I have to tell you the weirdest thing that happened to me. I haven't even so I was scrolling on Instagram
Yeah.
and I scrolled through an ad and the girl looked exactly like me.
No
Like
way.
and
Wow.
I'm trying to figure out if maybe so on House of Cards, on like season 5 of House of Cards, they were showing these political campaigns where they were trying to make the people look a little bit like them so that they were more interested in engaging with the ad. But I showed my husband, I showed my friends, and I'm like, look at this girl. And they were like, that is you. That is so weird.
Wow.
And so I wonder if they're
Wow.
starting to put our faces in ads or something that looks similar to us, because then we're more likely to stop on it or see ourselves in that product. And that whole idea of curated AI generation, that freaked me out. And I really am curious about that. And I want to dive into that a little bit more because
Wow.
this
No
is
kidding.
the strangest thing that's ever happened to me. And it could just be that there's a girl who looks just like me on the internet,
Yeah.
or they're messing with us. And this
We
is
all
the
have a
start of something new.
doppelganger somewhere. Somewhere.
Yeah.
But I suppose you could take your own image and then put it in Google search and see if you could find versions of you.
Yeah,
But
potentially.
that's kind of a dumbed down search, though. I think it just finds things that are similar.
I haven't used Google probably in 6 months.
What? What are you using instead? Like, how do you
Perplexity. I use Perplexity
really?
AI because it will search all of the places on Google or
Yeah,
wherever, and then give you a written summary of all the information you're looking for with links if you want to go check it out more. But you don't
yeah.
have to cut through ads. You don't have to go through
Right.
sponsored content, any of this stuff. I'll say, hey, what's happening with this? And it will give me a summary. If I want to know what's happening right now with something, I'll go on to X, formerly Twitter,
Yeah,
and they have an AI system built into it. And I'll say, tell me what people are saying right now about this. And their AI will summarize everybody's tweets on that topic for me in real time and tell me what's happening there. So if I want, and I don't super trust like a lot of mainstream media sites anymore.
yeah.
So I use that Perplexity to give me a landscape view of what's happening. And then I'll dive deeper into some resources from that site if I want to
How
figure
did
out
how
more.
did the how does AI make its revenue? Like, how is it making money then? Like, there's
So
obviously paid models, right?
yeah, but it's a great question because even the paid models, there's like a free version and a paid version of everything. The paid version is $20 a month. I'm
Hmm.
telling you, I doubt they're listening to this, but I would pay 10 times. I would pay 20 times. I would pay $500 a month for AI. Honestly, like I can't imagine
Hmm.
my life without it. The paid versions are so much better than the free versions. And I pay for every subscription just because I use them all the time.
Hmm.
And I do not know how they are making money. They're raising capital right now, like through venture capital funds. They're doing capital raises, but eventually they're going to have to incorporate things like advertising, I'm assuming, or probably selling our data or something. Like something's gonna have to change. This is such early days in AI. I don't know how the revenue model is going to work because it is so expensive to build these models and
Oh yeah.
train them. Like, and the amount of users they have, though, I don't know how they're going to sustain it. But
I sometimes, you think of a lot of the way a lot of technology has gone is that it comes out inexpensive, free, and then you're hooked on the crack.
I'm
And it's
hooked.
like, hey, guess what? Now it's $100 a month. So, and then you just like, well, I don't have a choice now.
Yeah, honestly, and that's probably where this will going. They're just trying to get everybody hooked. But I'm one of those like, take my money. Here you go.
Mhm.
I'll pay it. It's fine.
Is that good, hey? Like it makes
Oh,
a difference to you?
it is like the difference between the free version of ChatGPT is like having an assistant who's like a 10th grade work experience student versus somebody with 10,000 PhDs. Like it's
Really?
like no contest. The fact that I get ChatGPT for $20 a month is like having a private jet for the price of a bicycle. Like I'm still like, is this a scam? Because this is just like too great. And so I have 10 subscriptions to all the new AI models that come out. I have a subscription. I compare them against each other. Some are really good at this, some are really good at this. And Google's Gemini, even. If you have a G Suite, like a Google Suite, where you have Google Docs and
Yeah, yeah.
Gmail and everything, it hooks into your Google Suite,
Oh,
which
really?
is what's great. I can say, hey, I want you to go through my email and pull out every invoice from my online shopping in December and put them in a spreadsheet and add them up for me and tell me what I spent on online shopping. And
Wow.
it will just go in and do that because it has access to my Google account.
Wow.
Or check through all my Google documents and find anywhere where I talked about Craig or any conversation through any of my transcripts of my podcasts that are on YouTube where we mention artificial intelligence. Pull it out and put them in a document for me so that I can check my predictions in 5 years.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so it can kind of integrate into what we're already doing.
Do we worry that that's kind of like the natural next step is, are we concerned at all that they're accumulating data?
100%, but Google already has all our data, right? So then there's the idea of, do I trust Google more because they already have access to all my emails and all my
Mhm.
data, rather than OpenAI, where they have not been transparent about what they're training their model on and where they're getting it from. But like Meta has an AI system that they've built that they've trained on all our Facebook data. And
Mm,
so now the big players are the people who own data. So
right.
Google owns a ton of data, right? So Facebook owns a ton of data. OpenAI stole all the data. They decided they were going to go with the ask for forgiveness rather than permission approach. Amazon has one. And so these big companies that already own data is about to be so, so valuable. And we are the product. And so I think we're all going to be very, very aware of
Yeah.
who we're sharing our data with.
Who can I guess it makes it harder for me to be nefarious. Like I can't just go out and do bad
Or
things.
easier. I
Or
don't know,
even,
man.
yeah.
It's if you're determined to use it to do bad things, it is very easy to do. So we at least have to know all the ways that people are using it for bad things. Like there's been tons of examples in the news. Like someone did deepfake images of Taylor Swift, sexually explicit ones, and distributed them all over Twitter.
Yeah.
And they circulated for like 7 hours, millions and millions and millions. And a robocall called New Hampshire voters during the primary and told them in Joe Biden's voice, don't vote. You don't want to waste your vote. You want to save it for October. Right. So that idea, or there's, students in New York who deep faked a video of their principal on a racist tirade and distributed it on TikTok. And so we're seeing all of these bad uses, but there's no infrastructure in place
Yeah,
to
yeah,
prevent it. There's no legislation. Like, sure, legislation applies, right? Like if I'm using deepfake child porn to get pictures off your Facebook page of your kid,
yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
there's still laws that apply to being in possession of child porn, whether or not that is AI generated or not. If I have a picture of that on my phone, I'm in trouble. But then it gets gray with, okay, well, this is an 18-year-old, but it's not a real person and it doesn't exist, but a kid in the
Yeah.
school has it. It's also gray, and
Mm.
legislation just moves so slow, and nothing's going to happen in the United States right now because of the election.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Right.
I don't know what Canada's doing, but that's a whole other conversation. And so everyone's just trying to
Nobody
make it up
knows
as they
what
go.
Kennedy said.
Yeah, agree.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, I guess in the reality is as soon as you turn off your computer, you're disconnected from it, right? Like you don't, I guess in your phone, but
Well, kind of, but the way that these AI models were released and the idea behind OpenAI being started was they were going to release these models, the back end of them, the code, open source, so that I could download
right, yeah.
basically Meta's version of AI, put it on my computer, disconnect from the internet, and I have it run locally at my house.
Wow.
Right. So once that genie's out of the bottle, we can't just like flip the switch. Everybody has the code now. And so when you see
Mhm.
companies like Canva or Duolingo or all these companies that are like, we have AI now, we have AI now. They didn't build their own models. They're just using the back end of all these big
Wow, that's
models.
crazy. I feel
Yeah.
like there's a bit of a saturation effect where, like humans have a saturation capacity. We have a capacity for technology. And that's probably why people didn't immediately jump onto like big screen cell phones. There was me staying with the flip phone, but because we get saturated a little bit with it, and you
Yeah.
see it a lot too, where it's like, well, not only do you need this, but now you need this software and this technology and
It's
this.
exhausting.
And
It's
it's like
exhausting.
so much. You almost need an assistant just to run all the technology that you're trying to manage. So
100%. And I
sometimes
think,
I just want to go fishing sometimes.
yeah, honestly,
Call it
and you're
quits.
not alone. I think the addiction piece for me is just that I just find a way with every single one that makes something I do easier.
Yeah.
And it increases my productivity or it helps me learn something deeper or more. But yeah, I think eventually there'll be like apps on your phone, right? Like how many apps do you have on your phone?
Too
Quite a
many.
few.
Like,
They're each for different things. And
yeah.
I think this will be kind of like that. Like I have a go-to AI model that I use for this, a go-to I use for this, and I just flip over and use them for different tasks that I do in my everyday life until I can automate them. And some of them I have automated already with
Yeah.
AI. If I get an email, do this, add a copy here, start this, send a message to my assistant, and then create a folder, create a copy email into that folder, then create calendar invites, whatever. And so that idea of automating does make life
Yeah.
easier, but it does make life harder and it does get overwhelming. And I think it's hard to know where to start, which I totally, totally get.
Yeah.
I think the best thing people can do to start is to just start with Pi, the
Yeah.
app, because it's very friendly and conversational, and just get comfortable like prompting it and having voice conversations with it and seeing how it works and how you get better responses or worse responses. And then from there, make a list of everything you do in a day and look around or ask ChatGPT, hey, is there a way that I can make this task easier in my job, and see what it says, and then try that, and just baby steps, just spend time interacting with it. But everything I talk about is the result of 8 to 10 hours a day for a
Yeah.
year and a half, right? Like it just kind
Yeah.
of accumulates and you get more comfortable with it, kind of like we did with the internet or social media. We just kind of figure it out
Do you
as we
think there'll
go.
ever be like a master, I'm just making it up, but like a master AI that can go in and find all the information from all the multiple AIs that exist?
Yeah, there is actually a couple of those,
Oh,
like even Perplexity, when it searches results for me, it can go into Claude, it can go into, but really all of these models aren't programmed really with information. Like they're not holding the whole internet in their brain. They're just conversational. They're giant predictive text machines that are just trying to spit out a response based on everything they've read. It's just trying to predict what you want to hear. And so they have knowledge cutoffs and they're all just really doing the same thing, but they just have different strengths.
hmm.
So some of them just are better at doing written responses. Some are better at making pictures. One that I want you to go try out as soon as we're done here is one called Suno.ai, Suno.ai. And you just say, make me a country song about a guy named Craig who runs a podcast, and it will
Really?
instantly write you any song about anything in any genre.
That's
So
crazy.
just have fun experimenting and playing with it. And
Who owns
yeah,
the copyright for that if I do that?
so that's a great question. Great question. As of right now, based on kind of the laws that exist, anything AI generated can't be copyrighted, which is what part of the reason
Mhm.
I don't use AI to write anything for me, right? Besides
Right.
the fact that I'm not sure how even ethical or accurate it is. If you were to use an image generator to generate your company logo at
Hmm.
the office, trademark office, like if it's not a certain percentage of human or the majority of it's not human generated, you can't copyright it.
Wow.
So that's an idea of the law is not being able to keep up. So some of the images I generate are like beautiful. I do landscapes of Waterton, AI generated waters and landscapes, stuff like that all the time.
Hmm.
They're so easy to generate. I don't care about copywriting them, but there are people who invest a lot of time into generating AI art and you can't copyright it right now. So that's a perfect
Wow.
example of something like that not keeping
That's
up quite
crazy.
yet.
Wow. Well, time will tell. Maybe what we'll do is we'll talk again in 6 months, and
Let's.
we'll see. That was crazy. I was totally wrong. So, or totally right. So, yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate your time. We could probably talk for hours and it'll be fun, but let's leave something to next time. So,
Yeah,
yeah, cool. Well, I certainly appreciate you coming on the show. We'll have this posted up and I don't know, there's going to be a lot of show notes on this one, I think. So, be a lot of fun. Some
probably,
stuff we'll
probably.
put it up. So, yeah, and
Thank
best
you
of
so
luck at
much.
all the stuff you're doing. That's going to be great. So, look forward to
Oh,
seeing more.
thank you. Thanks for having
Thanks very
me.
much. Yeah.